My wife said for the 1000th time, my ex would never disappoint me like this. I finally snapped. Then maybe you married the wrong person. She went pale. I continued, lucky for you, I can fix that mistake. The divorce attorney was on speed dial. I, 32 male, have spent the last 5 years being the consolation prize in my own marriage. I'm a structural engineer, a man who builds things to last. Yet I've spent my entire relationship watching my wife tear down our foundation brick by brick. 4 or 5 years, I have lived in the shadow of a ghost, her ex-boyfriend. He wasn't just an ex. To her, he was the gold standard. Every time I worked late to provide the life she demanded, every time I forgot to pick up a specific brand of organic almond milk, and every time I didn't react with enough passion during an argument, I heard the same line, my ex would never disappoint me like this. The anniversary of our 5th year was the breaking point. I had spent 3 months planning a trip to a secluded cabin in the Smokies. I booked a private chef. I bought her a $4,000 vintage watch she'd been eyeing. On the second night, the chef was slightly late due to a local storm. She didn't just get annoyed. She threw her wine glass across the room. Typical, she spat, her face contorting with that familiar, entitled sneer. I told you we should have gone to the Maldives, but you're always so cheap with your calculated risks. My ex would have had a private jet waiting. He would never disappoint me like this. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I felt a cold, clinical switch flip in my brain. The calculated risk side of me finally saw the math, and the numbers were at 0. Then maybe you married the wrong person, I said. My voice was so calm it seemed to vibrate the air. She went pale. She wasn't used to me pushing back. Usually, I'd apologize, try to make it up to her, and spend another month trying to earn her approval. What did you say? I said you made a mistake, I continued, standing up and pulling my phone from my pocket. And lucky for you, I'm an engineer. I fix mistakes. I can fix this one right now. I hit the top contact on my speed dial. It wasn't a friend. It was a high-asset divorce attorney I'd quietly consulted 6 months ago when I found her private messages to her ex, the very man she used as a weapon against me. Hey, I said into the phone, eyes locked on hers. It's time. File it first thing Monday. Serve her at her mother's house. She started screaming then. It was a high-pitched, entitled sound, the sound of someone who realized their safety net had just turned into a noose. You can't do this. You're overreacting. It was just a comment. It was the 1000th comment, I said, grabbing my pre-packed bag from the bedroom. I had known this moment was coming. I had been ready for weeks. Go find your gold standard. I'm done being your silver medal. As I walked out into the rain, she was shouting about the prenuptial agreement. She thought she was clever when we signed it. She thought the infidelity clause she insisted on, the one that penalized a cheater heavily, would protect her. She had no idea that I had been documenting her emotional affair with the ex for over a year. The real game hadn't even started yet. I drove straight to a hotel, blocking her number. I knew her patterns. She would call her mother, then she would call him. She thought she was the one in control. But in the state where we reside, alienation of affection and adultery laws have specific nuances when a prenup is involved. She has spent years telling me I wasn't enough. Now, she was about to find out exactly how much nothing looks like when the bank account are frozen and the house is listed as a premarital asset. BY Monday morning, the reality of my fix began to set in for her. I had already moved half of my personal belongings out of the house while she was at her sister's for the weekend, venting about how unstable I had become. She thought this was a tantrum. She expected me to crawl back with a bouquet of lilies and an apology for my outburst. Instead, she got served at 10:15 a.m. while she was sitting in a high-end bistro with her mother. My attorney, a shark who specializes in high-net-worth dissolutions, didn't just file for divorce. He filed a motion for temporary orders to freeze all commingled accounts. Because I had used my premarital inheritance to pay off the mortgage on our home 3 years ago, and because of the specific wording in our prenup regarding commingled assets, the house was legally on shaky ground for her. She had assumed that because we lived there together Half of it was hers. She was about to learn a very expensive lesson in property law. At 11 a.m., my phone exploded with notifications. I didn't answer. I had already diverted my paycheck to a new individual account. Around 2 p.m., she showed up at my office. She bypassed the receptionist, her face a mask of fury and smeared mascara. She didn't look like the poised, entitled woman who looked down on my calculated nature anymore. She looked desperate. "Are you insane?" she yelled, slamming the divorce papers onto my desk. My colleagues peered over their cubicles. "You're filing for divorce because of a comment about my ex? Do you know how pathetic that makes you look? You're throwing away 5 years over your own insecurity." I didn't look up from my blueprints. It's not insecurity. It's an audit. I looked at the investment, my time, my money, my emotional labor, and I looked at the returns. The returns were just insults and comparisons to a man who hasn't held a steady job in a decade. The math doesn't work. "You can't freeze the accounts," she screamed, her voice cracking. "I have bills. My car payment is due tomorrow. You're trying to star me out." "Your car is a lease in my company's name," I reminded her calmly. "And for the conduct clause you insisted on adding to the prenup. The one meant to punish me if I ever stepped out. It also covers financial dissipation for non-marital interests." "I have the bank statements." "Honey, I know about the $15,000 you loaned to your ex over the last 18 months. That came out of our joint savings. That's a breach of contract." She went dead silent. The blood drained from her face again, but this time it didn't come back. "I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered. "I have the wire transfers," I said, finally looking her in the eye. "I have the screenshots of you telling him you'd take care of him because I was too busy working to notice. You were right about one thing. Your ex would never disappoint you like this. He's too busy living off my hard work to ever let you down. But the bank is closed." She tried a different tactic, the victim pivot. She started to sob, reaching across the desk to touch my hand. "I was just lonely. You're always working. He was just a friend I was helping out. Please don't do this. We can go to counseling." "We're past counseling," I said, pulling my hand away. "You used my own money to fund the man you constantly use to belittle me. That's not loneliness. That's predatory. You have 24 hours to vacate the house. My attorney is sending over the list of premarital property that you are allowed to take. Anything else stays, or I'll add a theft charge to the filing." She stood up, her eyes narrowing into slits. The entitlement returned, sharper than ever. "You think you're so smart. You think you've won. I'll take you for everything. I'll tell the judge you were emotionally abusive. I'll make sure everyone knows you're a cold, calculating monster who kicked his wife out for being lonely." "Good luck with that," I said. "I've been recording our discussions for the last 6 months. In this state, one-party consent is the law. The judge is going to love the recording of you laughing about how you're milking the engineer while your ex-boyfriend is in the background asking when the next transfer is coming through." She let out a guttural scream of frustration and swiped a model bridge off my desk, shattering the plastic across the floor. She stormed out, but the victory felt hollow, not because I missed her, but because I realized I'd been living with a stranger for half a decade. But the calculated part of me wasn't done. If she wanted to play dirty, I had a whole sandbox of evidence she hadn't even considered. I called my lawyer. She's going to try the abuse angle. Trigger the deposition for the ex. Let's see how fast he turns on her when his allowance is legally labeled as marital fraud. The following week was a masterclass in entitlement. My wife didn't go quietly. She went to war. She hired a bulldog attorney, a man known for high-conflict divorces, and immediately filed for emergency spousal support, claiming she had no access to funds and was destitute due to my financial abuse. She even went on social media, posting cryptic quotes about surviving narcissism and finding strength in the storm. Her friends, who had lived off the dinners and drinks I paid for, were quick to leave supportive comments. It was a calculated smear campaign designed to make me settle quickly just to save my reputation. But my attorney and I were ready. We didn't respond to the social media bait. We waited for the first court hearing. In the hallway of the courthouse, she walked up to me, flanked by her mother. She looked immaculate, dressed in a conservative navy suit, trying to play the part of the wronged, dutiful wife. "It's not too late," she whispered, her voice dripping with fake pity. "Drop this. Give me the house and a fair settlement, and I'll tell everyone it was just a misunderstanding. If we go in there, I'll ruin you. My lawyer is going to bring up every time you raise your voice. I'll make sure you never work as a lead engineer again. Are you finished?" I asked, checking my watch. "You're a cold bastard," her mother hissed. "She gave you the best years of her life, and you're treating her like a line item on a spreadsheet. Her ex was right about you. You have no soul." "If he's so right," I said. "It's a shame he's currently sitting in a deposition room 3 floors up, sweating through his cheap shirt." Her face went from smug to ghostly in a heartbeat. "What?" "We subpoenaed the gold standard," my lawyer intervened, smiling thinly. "And since we have proof of the $15,000 transfer, he had a choice. Testify truthfully about the nature of those payments or be named as a co-conspirator in a civil suit for fraud and marital waste." Guess which one he chose? We walked into courtroom. The judge was a no-nonsense woman who had seen every trick in the book. My wife's lawyer started his opening gambit, painting a picture of a controlling husband who uses engineering salary to imprison his wife emotionally. He demanded $8,000 a month in temporary alimony. Then it was our turn. My lawyer didn't argue about my personality. He didn't talk about my coldness. He simply handed over a binder. "Your Honor, we'd like to present Exhibit A, sworn testimony from the ex-boyfriend in question. In this deposition, he admits that not only was he receiving monthly payments from a marital account, but that my client's wife was promising him a large lump sum once the divorce she was planning was finalized." The judge's eyebrows shot up. "Once the divorce she was planning?" "Correct," my lawyer continued. "We have text logs from 3 months before my client filed. The wife was coached by her ex on how to provoke my client into a reaction that could be used to claim emotional abuse, thereby bypassing the prenup's no-fault clause." I looked over at her. She was shaking. The bulldog lawyer was frantically whispering to her, asking why he hadn't been told about this. "There's more," my lawyer said. "The wife claimed she was destitute. However, we discovered a secondary, undisclosed bank account in her mother's name, where she's been siphoning her own salary for the last 2 years. That's a direct violation of the financial disclosure requirements of this court." The judge looked at my wife. "Is this true?" My wife tried to cry. She tried to... I was just protecting my self-defense. I knew he was going to leave me. I was scared. He's so calculated. I had to have a backup plan. "A backup plan funded by your husband's inheritance?" The judge remarked, her voice flat. "And payments to a third party while still residing in a marital home? That's not a backup plan, ma'am. That's bad faith." The judge didn't just deny her alimony. She issued an order for my wife to pay my legal fees for the day and set a secondary hearing to determine the exact amount of marital waste she had to pay back to me. As we exited the courtroom, my wife's mother was screaming at her in the hall, not for lying, but for getting caught. My wife, meanwhile, was frantically calling the ex. I watched her get sent to voicemail. "He's not answering, is he?" I asked as I passed her. "You ruined everything," she screamed, the mask finally falling off completely. "He was the only one who actually cared about me. You're just a machine. A machine that just stopped a direct deposit." I said, "By the way, I checked the GPS logs on the lease car. You've been taking it across state lines to see him. That's a violation of the lease terms I signed. The repo man should be at your mother's house by dinner time." I walked out into the sunlight, feeling lighter than I had in years. The calculated man had one more move to make, and it was going to be the one that ended her games for good. The final act didn't take place in courtroom. It took place in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in a part of town I usually avoided. After the judge's preliminary ruling, my wife's bulldog attorney realized he was representing a sinking ship with no treasure chest. He advised her to settle, but her entitlement was a terminal disease. She truly believed that if she could just get her gold standard ex to stand by her, they could ride off into the sunset with whatever scrap of my dignity she could claw away. I hadn't just been tracking her. I'd been tracking him. The ex was a guy who specialized in potential, but never results. He lived in a rental owned by his cousin and drove a car that was mostly duct tape and hope. When he realized my wife was no longer a golden goose, he did exactly what men like him do. He looked for the exit. I arrived at his apartment complex just as my wife was pulling up in her mother's SUV. She hadn't seen me yet. She was carrying 2 suitcases, looking like she was ready to move in. She banged on his door, her face lit with the desperate hope that her true love would provide the sanctuary I had cruelly taken away. The door opened. I stayed back, leaning against my car, watching the scene play out like a scripted tragedy. "I'm here," she cried, trying to push past him. He took everything. The house, the accounts, the car. "But we have each other, right? We can start over." The ex didn't move. He didn't hug her. He looked over her shoulder, his eyes scanning the parking lot, probably looking for the process server I'd sent his way earlier that morning. "Look," he said, his voice loud enough for the humid air to carry it to me. "That was fun when you were buying the steaks and paying my arrears. But I can't have you living here. I've got my own problems. Your husband's lawyer told me if I keep talking to you, I'm going to be named in a racketeering suit for the money you funnel me. I'm out." "But you said I was the one," she stammered, her suitcases hitting the pavement with a dull thud. "You said he was a disappointment. You said you'd never treat me like he did." "I lied," he said bluntly. "He's a sucker for putting up with you for 5 years. I'm not. Don't call me again." He slammed the door. She stood there, staring at the peeling pane of a cheap apartment door, the silence of the parking lot ringing in her ears. That was the moment the reality of her gold standard hit her. He wasn't a king. He was a parasite, and she had killed the host. I cleared my throat. She spun around, her eyes widening. "How long have you been there?" "Long enough to see the perfect man in action," I said. I walked toward her, handing her a final envelope. "This is the settlement agreement. My final offer. You keep your personal effects, your premarital jewelry, and $5,000 to get you situated in a rental. In exchange, you sign away all claims to the house, my retirement, and you acknowledge the marital waste of the $15,000 you gave him." $5,000, she shrieked, the entitlement flickering one last time. "I can't live on that. That won't even cover 2 months of my lifestyle." "Then I guess you'll have to get a job," I said, "or ask your gold standard for a loan." "Oh, wait." She looked at the door, then back at me. The realization finally settled in her eyes. She had played a high-stakes game against a man who calculated tolerances for a living. She had tried to break a structure that was built to withstand her. She signed the papers on the hood of my car, her hand shaking so hard the signature was barely legible. The divorce was finalized 30 days later. Because of the evidence of financial fraud and the ironclad prenup, the judge signed off on the minimalist settlement. I kept the house. I kept my sanity. I heard through the grapevine that she moved in with her mother and is currently working as a receptionist at a dental clinic. The ex? Well, I made sure to send a formal tip to the IRS regarding the $15,000 in unreported income he received over the last year. Last I heard, they were auditing him into the Stone Age. People ask me if I feel bad for being so cold. I tell them the same thing I tell my junior engineers. A bridge doesn't care about your feelings. It only cares about the load you put on it. She put too much weight on us, and I simply removed the stress point. I'm currently sitting on the porch of the cabin in the Smokies, the one she hated. The air is quiet. There's no one here to tell me I'm a disappointment. And honestly, the view is much better without her in the frame.